Hey guys, welcome to part 3. So as a reminder, what we're doing here is just listening to me talk about how I might enter an article into an annotated bibliography that I was working on. I'm giving you what are best practices, and I'm using my own work so that I can guarantee you that there are many different takes on how I might describe my own research design, and in what context that would work, right? So you are doing this for a specific study you are proposing. Part of your point of view is whether or not this article is valuable and in what ways is it valuable to your work. So that's going to change depending on who's writing the annotated bibliography. So again, I'm going to use the second Review of Higher Ed article, which is available for you to look at some of the annotations I've made. Again, these are not right or wrong answers. I'm just showing you how I see my own article, which doesn't necessarily mean that if somebody's reviewing it from an educational psychology perspective, that they're going to come up with the same issues and relevance and critique that I might from a higher ed perspective. All right, so Google Sheets. Google Sheets is not a mandatory way to create, to create a annotated bibliography, but it works because it allows you to search within a specific column. So when you have 20, like you will have, or minimum of 20 articles, you'll be able to potentially search and sort based on data collection procedures. That may be helpful, it may not be helpful, but what we do is as we read, we track things so that later, after we've read all 20, we can start to see patterns or comparisons and contrasts amid the articles. So this third section is about methods, right? The first was just logging what the titles were. The second was about the research design and discerning that. And the third is about methods, which Creswell and Creswell call an approach. So again, this particular study in the abstract, they say this qualitative interview study. Now, is that the only way to describe it? No. In fact, it's probably also potentially, I might call it a case study. I might use the word qualitative. I might call it just an interview study. Your bibliography, what do you need it to be? What do you tend to track? All right, so let's talk about key variables, which some people have said don't apply as much in qualitative work. That's not true. In fact, the more rigorous the qualitative work is, the more clear that they actually are using empirical variables that they've chosen. They're not numbers, but they're very specific. So in this particular article, we use the decisions dual credit teachers made to administrative, pedagogical, some spelling error. How do you spell pedagogical? Okay. Professors are people too. And curricular grading expectations. And one of the ways that I can track that, well, obviously I can go down to the methods section, which we've called research design. Again, if you don't know about the 5 sections of a research manuscript, you should probably review some of your 702 readings. These are pretty basic. The third section of any given manuscript usually just outlines the method. So when you are going to fill this part out, look in the method section. So again, we don't come out and say the key variable in this study is. As readers, you get to help figure out what that is for yourself. So there are hints, right? We talked about that this is the target of inquiry is middle space reform, which is a invisible concept. So how are we going to proxy? What are we actually going to look at to measure whether or not this middle space reform is working, or at least is working by implication of the data, the inferences that we can draw from the data. The word measure I don't normally use when I'm just teaching a qualitative course, but I want to demonstrate that there are more similarities between qualitative and quantitative research designs than potentially you might think. So the language can be different, but the bottom line is that we're going to look at the implementation of dual credit courses to gauge this middle space reform. So the courses themselves are a proxy for a type of college access reform. Again, there's going to be cite and sample answers to your questions based on the sample header, the data collection header, right? We can extrapolate a summary of data collection from the manuscript. That we don't come out and say data collection method is in one sentence. The reader is going to discern it. Now, again, in the last video, I explained that looking for topic sentences is usually a sign that an author knows what's important to the reader and is offering it in a place that's easily accessible, as opposed to burying it somewhere in the middle of a paragraph or at the end of a section. So again, extrapolate the summary of data analysis from the manuscript. Findings from the study derive from 2 phases of coding and data interpretation. 2 phases of coding that yielded descriptive findings first and theoretical findings second. That's my summary of my own methods. It's not actually what I wrote in the article. Theoretical framework, we got from the literature review, triangulation of multiple data sources, from the trustworthiness section, which is credibility, could be validity. Again, qualitative, quantitative doesn't mean that there aren't these basic elements that all researchers attempt to address in any given study. If you don't address those things, you leave yourself open to criticism and critique. These are expected of scholars. Methods are totally separate.